The gunshot echoed across the Montana territory like a crack of thunder, sending Isaac Young diving for cover behind an overturned wagon. It was 1873, and the promise of gold had drawn men like vultures to carrion, but Isaac hadn't come for riches, he'd come for a second chance. "You missed again, Thornton," Isaac called out, his hand steady on his Colt revolver. "My grandmother could shoot straighter, and she's been dead 10 years. Across the dusty street of the newly established town of Prospect Ridge, Edgar Thornton snarled and took aim again. "This ain't about the gold anymore, Young. This is about Kate," Isaac grimaced at the mention of her name. Kate Patterson had been the schoolteacher who'd arrived on the same stagecoach as Isaac 6 months prior. They'd barely spoken 2 words to each other before Thornton had decided she belonged to him. "Miss Patterson makes her own choices," Isaac shouted back, peering around the edge of the wagon. "And from what I hear, she chose not to have anything to do with you." The next shot splintered wood inches from Isaac's face. He rolled away, coming up on one knee to return fire. His bullet caught Thornton in the shoulder, spinning the man around. "Next one goes in your heart if you don't drop that gun," Isaac warned, advancing slowly. Thornton's face contorted with rage and pain, but he wasn't foolish enough to test Isaac's marksmanship a second time. He let his pistol fall to the dirt. "This ain't over," Thornton spat as the town sheriff and his deputy emerged from the saloon, finally roused by the commotion. Isaac holstered his weapon. "It is for today." As the sheriff led Thornton away, Isaac noticed her standing on the boardwalk outside the schoolhouse. Kate Patterson, her chestnut hair gleaming in the afternoon sun, her blue dress a spot of color in the dusty landscape. She didn't wave or call out, but their eyes met across the distance. Something unspoken passed between them, and Isaac felt his heart quicken. Little did he know that this moment would be the first step on a journey spanning decades, a journey of love, loss, redemption, and ultimately, peace in a land that rarely offered it. Kate Patterson had not planned to stay in Prospect Ridge for more than a season. The Montana territory was still wild, untamed, and at times lawless. But the small community had needed a teacher, and she had needed distance from her past in Boston, from the scandal that had followed her father's financial ruin and subsequent suicide. The frontier offered anonymity, if nothing else. What she hadn't expected was to find herself drawn to the quiet, intense Isaac Young, a man who spoke little of his past but whose actions spoke volumes about his character. 2 days after the shootout with Thornton, Isaac appeared at the schoolhouse door after the children had gone home. Kate was erasing the day's lessons from the blackboard when she heard his footsteps. "Mr. Young," she acknowledged without turning. "I assume you've come to collect your thanks for defending my honor." "No, madam," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "I came to apologize for bringing trouble to your door." That made her turn. Isaac stood just inside the threshold, hat in hand, his dark hair falling across his forehead. There was a seriousness to his green eyes that made him seem older than his 30 years. "Thornton's choices are not your responsibility, Mr. Young," she said, setting down the eraser. "Perhaps not, but I could have handled it differently." He took a step forward. "I don't want you thinking I'm the sort who solves problems with a gun." Kate studied him. The gossip around town was that Isaac Young had been a cavalry officer back east before coming west, that he'd fought in the war between the states and carried wounds both visible and hidden. Others whispered that he'd been a bounty hunter or even an outlaw seeking redemption. "What sort are you then, Mr. Young?" she asked. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "A man looking to build something, Miss Patterson, something lasting. A gold mine," she asked, well aware of the claims he'd staked outside town. "A life," he corrected. "The gold, if there is any, is just a means to an end." Kate found herself intrigued despite her better judgment. And what end would that be? A home, land, perhaps someday. He hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "I've taken up enough of your time." I merely wanted to assure you that Thornton won't be troubling you again." As he turned to go, Kate surprised herself by calling after him. "Mr. Young." He paused at the door. "The children are taking a nature expedition tomorrow afternoon by the creek. We could use a guide familiar with the territory, someone to point out the native plants and perhaps—" She found herself blushing slightly, demonstrate how to pan for gold, educational purposes only, of course. The smile that spread across Isaac's face transformed him from handsome to breathtaking. "I'd be honored, Miss Patterson. What time shall I meet you?" And with that simple exchange, the course of their lives began to shift, like a river changing its path after years of pushing against the same stubborn stone. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect for an expedition. Kate led 20 excited children down to the creek, a half-mile from town. Isaac was already there, waiting patiently, several pans and simple tools laid out on a blanket. "Children, this is Mr. Young," Kate introduced. "He's going to show us some of the skills that brought people to our territory." Isaac nodded respectfully to the class. "Good morning. Who here has heard stories about finding gold?" Every hand shot up, accompanied by eager chatter. "My pa says there's gold in every stream if you know how to look," called out Tommy Jenkins, the blacksmith's son. "My uncle got rich in California," added Sarah Miller. Isaac smiled. "Well, finding gold takes patience and a keen eye. Let me show you how it's done." For the next hour, Isaac demonstrated the art of panning, showing the children how to sift through sediment, how to recognize the gleam of gold among the ordinary stones. Kate watched him with the children, noting his gentle patience, the way he knelt to their level, his obvious delight when 10-year-old Mary Williams found a tiny fleck of gold. "You have a way with them," Kate said quietly when the children were occupied with their own attempts at panning. Isaac looked surprised by the compliment. "They remind me of how I was at their age, full of questions, eager to learn." "Were you raised in the West?" He shook his head. "Pennsylvania. My father was a farmer, taught me everything about working the land, though I had dreams beyond the plow." A shadow crossed his features. The war changed those dreams, changed everything. Kate wanted to ask more, but sensed his reluctance. Instead, she shared a piece of her own past. "I understand change. My father was a banker in Boston. When he lost everything, I had to find my own way." Isaac's eyes met hers with newfound understanding. "We're both starting over, then." "It appears so." Kate smiled, then turned her attention back to the children. "Billy Matthews, don't you dare push Susie into that water." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with laughter and learning. As they walked the children back to town, one small boy tugged on Isaac's sleeve. "Mr. Young, are you sweet on Miss Patterson?" Kate felt her cheeks flame as Isaac stammered slightly before regaining his composure. "That's not a proper question, young man," he said firmly, but the twinkle in his eye when he glanced at Kate told a different story. The following week saw Isaac becoming a regular visitor to the schoolhouse. He brought geological specimens for the children to study, helped repair the leaking roof, and occasionally walked Kate home after school, their conversations growing deeper with each passing day. Spring melded into summer, and with it came both promise and peril. News arrived that Edgar Thornton had returned to the area with 2 companions, men with notorious reputations. Isaac took to carrying his revolver more visibly, and Kate noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon when they were together. "You're worried," she observed one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Thornton isn't the type to forget a grudge," Isaac admitted. "I've heard he's been asking about my claim, about my routines." Kate felt a chill despite the warm evening. "Perhaps you should speak to the sheriff. Sheriff Davis is a good man, but he can't be everywhere." Isaac turned to face her, his expression serious. "Kate, I think it might be best if we weren't seen together for a while. I wouldn't want Thornton to use you to get to me." The use of her first name didn't escape her notice, nor did the protective instinct behind his words, but Kate Patterson hadn't survived scandal and starting over by being timid. "I'm not afraid of Edgar Thornton," she said firmly. And I won't let him dictate who I spend time with. Isaac's gaze softened. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I prefer determined, she countered with a small smile. Kate, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper as he took her hand in his, I care for you. More than I should, perhaps. If anything happened to you because of me, she squeezed his hand, interrupting him. Nothing will happen, but if you're truly concerned, then perhaps the solution isn't seeing less of each other, but making our connection official. Isaac's eyes widened. Are you suggesting, I'm suggesting, Mr. Young, that courting me properly might send a message that I am not unprotected? The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Miss Patterson, would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you? I believe I would, Mr. Young, she replied, her heart racing as his fingers intertwined with hers. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the street, nor the malevolent gleam in Edgar Thornton's eyes as he observed their tender exchange. The news of Isaac Young officially courting the schoolteacher spread through Prospect Ridge like wildfire. Most townspeople approved. Isaac had proven himself hardworking and honorable, and Kate had won their respect with her dedication to their children's education. Only a few voices, primarily those who frequented the saloon where Thornton and his men spent their evenings, muttered about the impropriety of a respectable woman consorting with a man who'd been known to use his gun. 3 weeks into their courtship, disaster struck. Kate was walking home from an evening visit with the pastor's wife when she sensed someone following her. Before she could react, rough hands grabbed her, a cloth covered her mouth, and darkness descended. She awoke in a small cabin miles from town, her head pounding and fear clutching at her heart. Edgar Thornton sat across from her, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. Good evening, Miss Patterson, he said with mock politeness. I apologize for the accommodations, but I needed a private conversation with you. Kate tugged at the ropes binding her to the chair. This is kidnapping. The law, Thornton scoffed. Out here I am the law, and I've decided that you and I have unfinished business. We have no business at all, Mr. Thornton. His smile chilled her. Oh, but we do. You see, I had plans for you before Young interfered. Now you're going to help me take what's mine. I'm not yours, Kate said defiantly, and I never will be, Thornton laughed. I'm not talking about you anymore, sweetheart. I'm talking about Young's gold claim. The man struck a rich vein last week, kept it quiet, but I have ways of knowing these things. You're going to help me convince him to sign it over. Kate's mind raced. She hadn't known about Isaac striking gold, but it made sense of his recent hints about having something important to discuss with her. He won't trade a claim for me, she said, trying to sound confident. Won't he? A man in love will do foolish things. Thornton stood, towering over her. My boys are delivering a message to him right now. He has until sunrise to bring the deed to his claim. Otherwise, he trailed the knife lightly along her jawline. Well, let's just say your pretty face won't be fit for teaching children anymore. Kate refused to show fear, even as her heart hammered in her chest. You underestimate both of us, Mr. Thornton. We'll see, he replied, moving to the cabin door. I need to prepare for our guest. Don't go anywhere. He laughed at his own joke as he left, locking the door behind him. Once alone, Kate immediately began working at her bonds. The rope was rough against her wrists, but she ignored the pain, focusing instead on creating slack. Her father had once shown her a magician's trick for escaping restraints a lifetime ago when they'd attended society events in Boston. She never imagined she'd need such knowledge in reality. It took nearly an hour of careful manipulation before her right hand slipped free. Quickly untying herself, Kate moved silently to the window. 2 men stood guard outside, rifles ready. The cabin appeared to be in a small clearing surrounded by pine forest, if she could make it to the trees. A plan began to form in her mind. There was a small stove in the corner of the cabin, still warm with embers. Kate quietly gathered what she could: papers, a wooden chair, and pushed them against the far wall. Using the embers, she started a small fire, then retreated to hide beside the door. When smoke began filling the cabin, she screamed, "Fire! Help! Fire!" The commotion brought one of the guards rushing in. As he entered, Kate swung a heavy iron skillet she'd grabbed from the stove, connecting solidly with his head. He crumpled without a sound. Taking his pistol, Kate doused the fire with water from a nearby bucket, then slipped out the door. The second guard was rushing toward the cabin, giving her the chance to disappear into the tree line. She had no idea which direction town lay, but she knew she needed to put distance between herself and the cabin. The moon provided enough light to navigate the forest, and Kate moved as quickly and quietly as possible, the stolen pistol clutched in her trembling hand. After what felt like hours of walking, she heard voices and froze. Carefully approaching, she glimpsed firelight through the trees. Another camp. For a moment she considered avoiding it entirely, but then she recognized one of the voices. "Isaac," she whispered, relief flooding through her. Moving closer, she saw him. Isaac, along with Sheriff Davis and 4 other men, gathered around a map spread on a fallen log. "She has to be somewhere in this area," Isaac was saying, his voice tight with worry. "Thornton's messenger said the cabin was near Rattlesnake Creek." "That's a lot of territory," one of the men replied, "and if we're not careful, we could walk right into an ambush." Kate stepped into the circle of firelight, "Or I could simply walk into your camp." The men whirled, guns half drawn before they recognized her. Isaac's face transformed from shock to overwhelming relief. In 2 strides, he reached her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "Kate," he breathed against her hair. "Are you hurt? How did you escape?" "I'm fine," she assured him, savoring the safety of his arms. "And I'll explain everything, but we need to move. Thornton will discover I'm gone if he hasn't already." Sheriff Davis approached, his weathered face serious. "Miss Patterson, we're mighty glad to see you safe, but Isaac is right, we need to know what we're facing." Quickly, Kate outlined what had happened and what she'd learned of Thornton's plan. Isaac's expression darkened when she mentioned the gold claim. "I was going to tell you," he said quietly. "I found a promising vein last week, but I wanted to be sure before I got anyone's hopes up." "That doesn't matter now," Kate insisted. "What matters is stopping Thornton before he hurts anyone else." Sheriff Davis nodded grimly. "This ends tonight. He's gone too far this time, kidnapping, extortion. Even in the territory, that'll earn him a rope." They formulated a plan quickly. Rather than waiting for Thornton to discover Kate's escape, they would take the fight to him. Using Kate's description of the cabin and its surroundings, they plotted an approach that would allow them to surround the location. "Kate, you'll stay here with Jenkins," Isaac said, indicating one of the men. "The rest of us will—" "No," Kate interrupted firmly. "I'm coming with you." Isaac's brow furrowed. "It's too dangerous." "I escaped on my own, didn't I?" she challenged. "Besides, I know the layout of the cabin and where the men were positioned, and," she added, raising the pistol she still carried, "I know how to use this." The men exchanged glances, and Kate could see them reassessing her. Finally, Sheriff Davis spoke. "She's right, Isaac. Her knowledge could be valuable." He turned to Kate. "But you stay behind us and follow orders, understood?" Kate nodded. "Perfectly." They moved through the forest like shadows, guided by the stars and Kate's recollections. As they neared the clearing, they could see that the cabin was now fully illuminated, with men moving about urgently. Clearly, her absence had been discovered. Thornton's voice carried through the night air, angry and threatening. "Find her. She couldn't have gone far, and get those horses ready. Young will be coming, and we need to be prepared." Sheriff Davis signaled for them to spread out, encircling the clearing. Isaac stayed close to Kate, his presence both protective and reassuring. "When this is over," he whispered as they crouched behind a fallen tree, "there's something I need to ask you." Kate glanced at him, surprised by his timing. Now, a faint smile touched his lips, not the question itself. "Just telling you it's coming." Before she could respond, Sheriff Davis's voice rang out from the edge of the clearing. "Edgar Thornton, this is Sheriff Davis. You're surrounded. Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up." The reaction was immediate. Gunfire erupted from the cabin as Thornton and his men took cover. Isaac pushed Kate lower behind their shelter as bullets thudded into the log. "Stay down," he ordered, returning fire carefully. The gunfight was brief but intense. One of Thornton's men fell almost immediately, caught in crossfire as he tried to reach the horses. Another surrendered quickly, throwing his weapon away and raising his hands. Then Kate spotted movement to their right. Thornton himself, attempting to slip away through a gap in the sheriff's cordon. Without thinking, she raised her pistol and fired a warning shot. "He's escaping," she shouted, pointing. Isaac was on his feet instantly, giving chase as Thornton disappeared into the trees. Kate followed despite Isaac's earlier instructions, unwilling to let Thornton escape after what he'd done. The forest was dark, but occasional moonlight filtered through the canopy, enough to keep Thornton's fleeing figure in sight. Isaac was faster, steadily closing the distance. Kate struggled to keep up, hampered by her dress and the uneven terrain. When she finally caught up, she found them in a small clearing, facing each other like duelists, both with guns drawn. "It's over, Thornton," Isaac said evenly. "Drop the gun." Thornton's face was contorted with hate. "It's never over, young. You took what was mine." The claim was staked legally, and Kate was never yours to begin with. A cruel smile spread across Thornton's face. "Maybe not, but if I can't have what I want, neither will you." His gun swung toward Kate, and 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Kate felt the wind of a bullet passing inches from her head, and then Thornton was falling. A look of surprise frozen on his face as Isaac's bullet found its mark. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Isaac holstered his weapon and turned to Kate, his eyes searching her face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Kate shook her head, still processing how close she'd come to death. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first," he replied, pulling her close. "When you came to Prospect Ridge, I was just existing before then." The sound of approaching footsteps announced Sheriff Davis and his men. The sheriff took in the scene with a practiced eye. "Self-defense," he concluded after hearing their account. "He drew on Miss Patterson. You had no choice." As they walked back to where they'd left their horses, Isaac kept Kate close to his side. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving her shaky but resolute. This night had changed them both, cementing something that had been building since that first afternoon by the creek. "About that question," Isaac said quietly as they rode side by side toward town in the pre-dawn light. Kate looked at him, her heart suddenly racing for reasons that had nothing to do with danger. "Yes. I was going to wait, do this properly with a ring and your favorite flowers, but tonight reminded me how uncertain life can be." He reined his horse to a stop, prompting Kate to do the same. "Kate Patterson, I love you. Will you marry me?" In the growing light of dawn, with the scent of pine and the distant mountains as their witnesses, Kate's answer was never in doubt. "Yes, Isaac Young. Yes, I will." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church of Prospect Ridge. Nearly the entire town attended, curious to see the culmination of a courtship that had involved gunfights and kidnapping events already being embellished in local retellings. Kate wore a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. Isaac, cleanly shaved and in his best suit, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such profound joy that it brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic townsmen. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with a depth of feeling that made them unique. When the pastor pronounced them man and wife, the cheers from the congregation seemed to shake the very rafters of the church. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and plenty of the local whiskey flowing freely. As the new Mrs. Young danced with her husband under the stars, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd both come from their first meeting. "Happy?" Isaac asked, holding her close as they swayed to the fiddle's melody. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Good. Because tomorrow, we start building that life I talked about." And build they did. With the proceeds from Isaac's gold claim, which proved substantial but not the bonanza Thornton had imagined, they purchased a tract of land 5 miles outside town. It had everything Isaac had dreamed of: fertile soil, a year-round creek, timber for building, and mountain views that stole the breath. Kate continued teaching while Isaac began constructing their home, a solid, 2-story house built to withstand Montana winters, and large enough for the family they both hoped to have. When not teaching, Kate worked alongside him, learning skills she'd never imagined needing in her Boston upbringing. By the following spring, their home was complete, and Kate resigned from the school to focus on their growing ranch. They started with a small herd of cattle, a few horses, and ambitious plans. The work was hard but satisfying, their partnership strengthening with each challenge overcome. Their first son, Joshua, was born that winter, a difficult birth that had Isaac pacing outside their bedroom while the doctor and midwife worked through the night. When finally allowed to enter, the sight of Kate, exhausted but radiant, holding their child, broke something open in Isaac's heart that he hadn't known was closed. "He has your eyes," Kate whispered as Isaac carefully took his son into his arms. "And your strength," Isaac replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for this gift." Life settled into a rhythm of seasons: planting and harvest, calving and branding, winter preparations and spring renewal. Their ranch, which they named Prospect Home in homage to their beginning, began to prosper. They added a barn, expanded their herd, and hired hands to help with the increasing workload. 2 years after Joshua's birth, their second son, Daniel, arrived, an easier delivery but no less miraculous. Kate recovered quickly, and soon was back to managing the household while caring for 2 young boys. Isaac often marveled at her resilience. The refined Boston schoolteacher had transformed into a capable frontier woman who could shoot as accurately as she could recite Shakespeare, who could birth a calf in the morning and host the pastor for dinner that evening without missing a beat. "You're staring again," Kate remarked one evening as she mended by the fire, the boys already asleep upstairs. "Can a man not admire his wife?" Isaac countered with a smile. "He can, but usually with less intensity unless he wants something," she teased. Isaac set aside the ledger he'd been reviewing. "I was just thinking about how different our lives might have been if we hadn't both ended up in Prospect Ridge." Kate's hands stilled. "Do you ever regret it, coming west?" "Never," he said without hesitation. "Everything that led me here, the war, the restlessness afterward, even the wild idea to search for gold, it was all leading me to you, to this life." Kate set her mending aside and moved to sit beside him. "Even with all the danger we faced, especially that," he said, drawing her close. "It showed me what we could overcome together." The years passed, marked by the growth of their sons and their ranch. Joshua and Daniel, 3 years apart in age but inseparable in spirit, became their father's shadows, eager to learn every aspect of ranching. By the time Joshua was 10 and Daniel 7, they were already taking on responsibilities that made Isaac swell with pride. Their family expanded again when Kate gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later by their youngest son, Matthew. Their home, once so new and empty, now echoed with children's laughter and the countless small sounds of a happy family. The territory changed. 2 more settlers arrived, the railroad pushed farther west, and Prospect Ridge grew from a mining camp into a proper town. Isaac was elected to the town council, his steady judgment and fair-mindedness making him a respected voice in local governance. Kate's influence extended beyond their home as well. She started a small library, taught reading classes for adults, and became known as someone who could be counted on in times of need, whether a birth, illness, or the harsh realities of frontier life that occasionally left children orphaned or families destitute. Through it all, their partnership remained the bedrock of their existence. They didn't always agree. Kate's progressive ideas sometimes clashed with Isaac's more traditional outlook, but they always found common ground, their respect for each other never wavering. When drought struck the region in 1889, testing even the most established ranches, Isaac and Kate faced the challenge together. They sold off part of their herd to preserve water and feed for their strongest breeding stock, tightened their belts, and worked longer hours to ensure their ranch would survive. The boys, now teenagers, shouldered responsibilities beyond their years. Joshua, at 16, led cattle drives to distant markets where better prices could be found. Daniel, 13 but already skilled with horses, took over much of the daily ranch work when Isaac traveled to negotiate with the bank or seek new markets. "You're pushing them too hard," Kate worried one evening as she watched the exhausted boys fall asleep at the dinner table. "They're still children." Isaac's face was lined with his own fatigue. "They're young men, Kate. This ranch will be theirs someday. They need to learn how to weather the hard times. And if they resent us for stealing their youth," Isaac considered this, his expression softening, "you're right, we'll ease back. The rain will come eventually." And it did. The following spring, a season of renewal that seemed to wash away the hardship of the drought. The land greened, the herd began to recover, and the family found moments for joy again: fishing expeditions, community dances, even a rare trip to Helena where they marveled at the territorial capital's growth. As Montana prepared for statehood, the young family prepared for transitions of their own. Joshua, now 18, announced his intention to attend college in Denver, a declaration that filled Kate with pride and Isaac with mixed emotions. "The ranch needs you," Isaac argued during a heated discussion in the barn, away from the younger children's ears. "The ranch has Daniel, and Matt's growing fast," Joshua countered. "I need to see more of the world, Pa, learn things that will help us build something even better when I return." Kate, who had followed them to the barn, spoke from the doorway. "He's right, Isaac. We've always taught them to dream beyond the horizon." Isaac looked from his wife to his eldest son, seeing in both the same determination that had first drawn him to Kate. "Engineering, you said." Joshua nodded eagerly. "The new century's coming, Pa. Electricity, machines, better ways to manage water and land. I want to bring that knowledge back home." After a long moment, Isaac extended his hand. "Make us proud, son." "I will, Pa, I promise." That autumn brought change and reflection. With Joshua gone to Denver, Daniel stepped fully into the role of his father's right hand. Elizabeth, now 12, took on more household responsibilities, allowing Kate to revive her teaching with small classes held in their home for neighboring families' children. Matthew, their youngest at 10, showed a natural affinity for working with the animals, especially the horses that were becoming an increasingly important part of their operation. As the 1890s progressed, the young ranch flourished despite the economic upheavals affecting much of the country. Isaac's foresight in diversifying their operation, raising horses alongside cattle, growing feed rather than purchasing it, maintaining modest but steady growth, insulated them from the worst effects of the national financial panics. Letters from Joshua brought news of the wider world into their home: technological innovations, political developments, and eventually, his engagement to a professor's daughter named Sarah, whom he promised to bring home after graduation. True to his word, Joshua returned in 1896 with his bride and his degree, full of plans for improving the ranch with modern methods. Isaac, now in his 50s with silver threading his dark hair, initially resisted some of Joshua's more ambitious ideas. "We've done fine with traditional ways," he insisted during one family dinner that had evolved into a strategy session. "But we could do better," Joshua pressed. "The irrigation system I'm proposing would double our hay production, which means more winter feed, which means a larger herd." "Yes, I understand the concept," Isaac interrupted. "I also understand debt, which your grand plans would require." Kate exchanged a glance with Sarah, both women recognizing the clash of generations playing out before them. "Perhaps," Kate suggested carefully, "we could implement Joshua's ideas in phases. test each one before moving to the next. Daniel, now 23 and recently married to a local girl named Rebecca, nodded. I like that approach. Joshua has good ideas, Pa, but you're right to be cautious. Isaac looked around the table at his family, at Kate, still beautiful at 48, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver, at his sons, grown into men of character, at his daughter, blossoming into a young woman with her mother's intelligence, at his youngest, absorbing every word of the discussion with keen interest. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with the size of their herd or the acreage they owned. A compromise, then, he agreed. We'll start with the irrigation system, but scaled down from your original plan. If it proves as successful as you believe, we'll expand from there. Joshua beamed. You won't regret it, Pa. I'd better not, Isaac said gruffly, but the pride in his eyes belied his tone. The turn of the century brought with it a sense of both accomplishment and anticipation. The young ranch had grown to become one of the most successful operations in the county. The irrigation system Joshua had championed indeed proved its worth, allowing them to expand thoughtfully. Daniel had developed a talent for breeding horses that brought buyers from as far as California. Elizabeth, now finishing her education in Helena, wrote of her plans to become a teacher like her mother. And Matthew, at 18, had revealed an unexpected artistic talent alongside his gift with animals, documenting the ranch and its surroundings in sketches that captured the spirit of their home. In the spring of 1903, with the ranch thriving under the combined stewardship of Isaac and his sons, Kate suggested they build a small cabin on the eastern ridge of their property, a place where they could occasionally retreat from the busy main house, which now often included grandchildren as well as ranch hands. Are you trying to get away from me, Mrs. Young? Isaac teased as they rode out to inspect potential sites. On the contrary, Mr. Young, Kate replied with the smile that still made his heart skip after 30 years of marriage. I'm trying to get you all to myself now and then. The cabin became their project that summer, a simple but comfortable structure with a wide porch facing the sunrise. They furnished it sparsely but with treasured items. The rocker Isaac had built for Kate when she was expecting Joshua, books they'd collected over the years, a quilt made from scraps of their children's outgrown clothes. It was there, on a golden afternoon in early autumn, that they sat together on the porch, watching Joshua and Daniel working with the horses in the distant field below, teaching Joshua's 10-year-old son and Daniel's 8-year-old the finer points of horsemanship. They've learned from the best, Kate said, slipping her hand into Isaac's as they observed their son's patient instruction. Isaac squeezed her fingers gently. We've been blessed beyond measure, haven't we? We have, Kate agreed, though not without our share of trials. Isaac nodded, thinking of the hardships they'd weathered, the drought years, the winter they nearly lost Daniel to pneumonia, the economic downturns that had tested their resilience. Yet through it all, their partnership had remained unshakable. Do you ever think about how it all began? He asked. That day by the creek when you brought your students to learn about gold panning, Kate smiled at the memory. I was already half in love with you, though I wouldn't have admitted it then. And I was completely smitten but too cautious to show it, Isaac confessed. I'd seen too much loss to believe in second chances. Yet here we are, Kate leaned against his shoulder, and I wouldn't change a moment of our journey. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the land in hues of gold and amber, Isaac found himself reflecting on the full circle of their lives. From the uncertain beginnings in a rough mining town to this moment of peaceful prosperity, they had built something that would outlast them both, not just the ranch with its fertile fields and healthy herds, but the legacy embodied in their children and grandchildren. What are you thinking? Kate asked, noticing his contemplative expression. That the real gold was never in the stream, Isaac replied, his voice husky with emotion. It was in finding you, in building this life together. Kate's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she leaned forward to kiss him softly. "My sentimental cowboy." "Only with you," he murmured against her lips. Below them in the field, their grandsons gave triumphant whoops as they successfully completed whatever lesson Joshua and Daniel had been teaching. The sound carried up to the cabin on the evening breeze the continuation of a legacy, the promise of generations to come. Isaac and Kate remained on the porch until twilight, watching their sons lead the boys and horses back to the main house, their silhouettes backlit by the setting sun. Neither felt the need to speak. After 3 decades together, they communicated as much in silence as in words. The ranch would continue to evolve in the coming years. Joshua would eventually implement his electric lighting system, bringing their home into the modern era. Daniel would expand the horse breeding program into one of the finest in the state. Elizabeth would return from her education to start a proper school on the ranch property for the growing number of children in the area. Matthew would combine his love of animals and art into a successful career illustrating scientific and agricultural texts. But on this perfect autumn evening, all of that future remained unwritten. In this moment, there was only the peace of accomplishment, the warmth of enduring love, and the satisfaction of knowing that from uncertain beginnings, Isaac and Kate Young had created something truly timeless, a legacy of love, perseverance, and family that would endure long after they were gone. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Isaac drew Kate closer. "Shall we join them for dinner?" "In a moment," Kate replied, unwilling to break the spell of the evening just yet. "Let's watch the stars come out first." And so they sat together, these two who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from dreams and determination, who had loved through hardship and joy alike. Their story, which had begun with a gunshot and a chance meeting, had unfolded into a tapestry rich with experience and emotion proof that even in the wild uncertainty of the frontier, true love could not only survive but flourish. The stars emerged one by one, eternal witnesses to their enduring bond. Below, the lights of their ranch house glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of home and family in the vast Montana landscape. And as darkness fully embraced the land they had tamed together, Isaac and Kate Young remained side by side, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one just as they had been from the beginning and would remain until the end.